Imagine waking up every day choosing between paying for heat or paying for food, only to discover that the people watching you starve are sitting on a $3 billion fortune that belongs to you. They watched me struggle for 27 years. They offered me crumbs while they dined on feasts bought with my birthright. Before we continue, if you love our stories, do well to encourage us by hitting the like button, share, and subscribe for more. My name is Hector Bellmont. I am 27 years old, a night shift warehouse loader, and the black sheep of the illustrious Bellmont dynasty. And up until last week, I thought I was just unlucky. It started on a Tuesday. I was sitting in my freezing studio apartment, eating instant noodles while watching the news. On the screen, my uncle, Oscar Bellmont, was waving from the deck of his new mega yacht. The news anchor called him a visionary genius. I just called him the uncle who once sent me a $50 gift card for Christmas while he bought his son a private island. I turned off the TV in disgust, and that's when I heard the mail slot clatter. On the floor lay a thick, yellowed envelope. There was no return address, just a wax seal I vaguely recognized from my childhood. Inside was a letter from my great-uncle Silas, a man who had died 3 days prior. It contained a single sentence. "Forgive me for waiting so long, but the truth is in box 404. Inside the main envelope was a small, padded manila pouch containing a heavy, rusted iron key. My hands were shaking as I walked into the vault of the First National Bank the next morning. The bank manager looked at my worn-out sneakers and faded hoodie with disdain, blocking my path. "Access is restricted to account holders only," he said stiffly. I handed him the key and my ID. He typed my name into his terminal, and his expression shifted from annoyance to confusion. "Mr. Bellmont, my apologies. It seems your great-uncle added you as a joint signatory to this box 20 years ago. We've been waiting for you." He led me to a dusty corner of the vault and pulled out box 404. When I was finally alone, I opened the lid. I expected maybe some old jewelry. Instead, I found a stack of legal documents that smelled of mildew and betrayal. On top was a document labeled Codicil of Revocation. I read the legal jargon 3 times. This document explicitly revoked the will Oscar had submitted to probate, citing coercion and fraud. It reinstated the original trust, leaving 100% of the controlling shares to my father. Shares that, as of today's market close, were worth over $3 billion. The air left my lungs. Oscar wasn't a visionary genius. He was a thief. For 20 years, he had been running a company that wasn't his. I wasn't the poor relation. I was the king, and they were the usurpers living in my castle. I sat on the cold floor of the bank vault for an hour, memories flooding back, but now they were tainted. I thought about my Aunt Veronica. She was the only one who ever showed me what I thought was kindness. When my car broke down last year, and I couldn't afford the repairs, she had slipped me an envelope with $500. "Don't tell your Uncle Oscar," she had whispered, hugging me tight. "You know how he gets about handouts. I just want you to be okay." At the time, I had cried tears of gratitude. I thought she was a saint. Now, reading the financial statements in the box, I realized the sick truth. That $500 wasn't charity. It was hush money. It was a microscopic fraction of the dividends my shares earned in a single hour. Veronica wasn't protecting me from Oscar's anger. She was managing the threat. She kept me close enough to monitor, but poor enough to be powerless. She played the role of the loving aunt to ensure I remained the grateful, pathetic nephew. The betrayal hurt worse than the theft. Oscar was a shark, but Veronica was a snake who smiled while she suffocated me. I knew I had to act normal until I had a plan, so I attended the mandatory Sunday family dinner at the Bellmont estate 2 days later. Walking through the marble halls felt different this time. I wasn't walking into my uncle's house. I was walking into my house. Dinner was an extravagant affair. My cousin, Richard Bellmont, was loud and drunk on expensive wine. He slammed his hand on the table, laughing. "Dad just ordered the new custom Ferrari for me. Matte black. It's going to look insane parked out front." I gripped my fork so hard my knuckles turned white. That Ferrari was bought with my inheritance. Every bite of food they took was stolen from my plate. "Hector, you haven't touched your steak." Oscar's voice cut through the noise. The table went silent. Oscar was staring at me, his eyes cold and calculating. He didn't look at people. He inspected them like assets. "You look pale. Is something bothering you?" My heart hammered against my ribs. "Just tired, Uncle Oscar. Double shifts at the warehouse." He didn't blink. He held my gaze for a second too long, searching for a crack. "Work hard," he said slowly, taking a sip of wine. "Whatever you're hiding, hard work usually fixes it." He knew something was off. I left the dinner early, claiming a migraine. My hands were sweating on the steering wheel the entire drive home. I kept checking my rearview mirror, paranoid that one of Oscar's security SUVs was following me. I thought I was being dramatic, letting the shock get to my head. I was wrong. When I got to my apartment building, my front door was unlocked. The wood around the frame was splintered. I pushed the door open slowly. My small apartment had been tossed. Drawers were pulled out, my mattress was flipped, and my laptop was smashed on the floor. But here was the chilling part. My TV was still there. My camera was on the shelf. They hadn't come to steal valuables. They were looking for information. I stood in the wreckage of my life, realizing the game had changed. Oscar wasn't just suspicious. He was on the hunt. He must have known Great Uncle Silas sent me something. If I stayed passive, I wouldn't just stay poor. I might end up dead. I couldn't fight them alone. I needed a weapon, and I needed someone who knew how to kill monsters. I needed a shark, and I found the biggest one in the city, Joseph Duke. He was a legendary corporate attorney who had been pushed out of the elite circles because he was too aggressive. Rumor had it, he despised the Bellmont family because Oscar had once ruined his reputation to win a case. I walked into his cluttered office, clutching my backpack. Duke didn't even look up from his papers. "I'm not taking pro bono cases, kid. The door is behind you." "I don't need charity," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I need you to help me destroy Oscar Bellmont." Duke stopped writing. He looked up, his eyes narrowing. He let out a dry, mocking laugh. "You want to take down the Bellmont Empire? You and what army?" I didn't say a word. I just unzipped my bag and slid the rusted metal box onto his desk. I pulled out the original codicil and placed it right on top of his paperwork. Duke picked it up, scanning the page. His smirk faded. He stood up, walked to the window, and read it again in the sunlight. When he turned back to me, the mockery was gone, replaced by a terrifying intensity. "This," Duke whispered, tapping the paper, "is a nuclear bomb. Where did you find this?" After I explained about the rusted box, Duke sat back, a shark-like grin spreading across his face. But when I suggested we sue them immediately, he slammed his hand on the desk. "No. If you file a lawsuit now, their legal team will bury you in motions and appeals for 20 years. You'll be an old man before you see a dime. We don't want a settlement, Hector. We want a total surrender." He paced the room, his mind working fast. "We need more than the will. We need proof that they are currently committing fraud to hide this money. We need a smoking gun that sends them to prison, not just to court." "How do I get that?" I asked. "I can't even get in the building." Duke smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. "We use a Trojan horse. You need to go to Oscar. Beg him. Cry if you have to. Ask for a low-level job. Make him think you're desperate and defeated. His arrogance is his weakness. If he thinks you're a broken puppy, he'll let you right into the house. And once you're inside, you gather the evidence we need to cut their throats." Swallowing my pride was the hardest thing I've ever done. I stood in Oscar's massive glass office the next day, looking at the floor while he inspected his fingernails. "I need a job, Uncle Oscar," I lied, keeping my voice small. "The warehouse cut my hours. The rent is overdue. I'll take anything, even the mailroom." Oscar leaned back in his leather chair, a cruel satisfaction on his face. He loved this. He loved seeing the rightful heir begging for scraps. "Well, Hector, family is family. I suppose we can find a place for you." He tapped his chin. "The legacy archives are a mess. It's mostly files from before the digitization project. Nobody goes down there, and it's where we keep the trash. Minimum wage. Take it or leave it." I forced a grateful smile. "Thank you, Uncle Oscar. You won't regret it." He didn't know how right he was. He thought he was banishing me to the dungeon to humiliate me. In reality, he had just handed me the keys to the kingdom. The archives were exactly where the old physical records of the share transfers were kept. He had just invited the fox into the henhouse. For 2 weeks, I played the part of the invisible employee. I wore baggy clothes, kept my head down, and spent my days organizing dusty boxes in the basement. But every night, after the security guard did his rounds, I went to work cross-referencing files. I was deep in the digital ledger when the basement door handle turned. I barely had time to dive behind a stack of server racks before the lights flickered on. It was my cousin, Richard. He was carrying a heavy banker's box marked 2019 tax records toward the industrial shredder in the corner. He was talking loudly on his phone. "I don't care what the auditor says. I'm handling it now. The paper trail ends tonight." He shoved a handful of documents into the shredder, the machine roaring to life. "Yeah, just pay the bribe," Richard laughed into the phone, watching the evidence turn to confetti. "Dad says we're untouchable." I held my breath, praying he wouldn't look toward the servers. I didn't just have a digital trail. I was witnessing active destruction of evidence. I brought the information to Duke's office late that night. He reviewed my notes, nodding slowly. "This is good. The bribery, the destruction of records, it proves criminal intent. But we need one final nail in the coffin to make sure the public turns on them instantly." He pinned a photo of my Aunt Veronica on his whiteboard. "She is the weak link," Duke said. "Oscar is a sociopath. He won't crack. But Veronica? She's emotional. She cares about her image. What do you need me to do?" I asked, though I already dreaded the answer. "You need to get her on tape," Duke said, sliding a tiny, high-tech recording device across the desk. "Get her to admit that they knew about the will. Get her to admit they stole it from you on purpose to save the legacy. If we have her voice confessing to the conspiracy, the police won't just freeze their assets. They'll arrest them at the gala." I picked up the small black device. It felt heavy. I had to manipulate the woman who had manipulated me my whole life. The hunter was about to become the hunted. Before I tell you how I turned the tables on my family's doubts and executed the most dangerous phase of my business expansion, I have to ask, if you have come with us this far, it means you are really invested in Hector's journey. Please do well to like this video, share it with friends who love satisfying underdog stories, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss a part. Also, tell us in the comments where you are listening from. We love seeing our global community. Thank you. The timeline for our attack was set by the Bellmonts themselves. 2 days after my meeting with Duke, Oscar announced the Legacy merger. It was a massive deal that would combine the Bellmont empire with an international conglomerate. Once the papers were signed, the company structure would change, and tracing my stolen inheritance would become nearly impossible. "This is it," Duke told me, pointing at the calendar. "The merger signing is happening live at the Belmont Gala on Friday. That is our deadline. If they sign those papers, you lose your leverage. We have to blow it all up before the ink hits the page." The pressure was suffocating. I had 3 days to get the final piece of evidence and psychologically break them down. We decided to turn the corporate headquarters into a haunted house for Oscar. I wasn't just going to steal the company back. I was going to make him terrified of his own shadow before I did it. We needed him irrational, angry, and sloppy. The plan was risky, but we had no choice. It was all or nothing. I started small. I knew Oscar was superstitious about dates, specifically the day my father died. From my access in the archives, I placed a physical copy of an old memo from that exact date into an envelope marked confidential legal. I slipped it into the slot on the internal mail cart marked CEO Suite, ensuring his assistant would pass it directly to him. I watched the chaos unfold on the security monitors. Oscar opened the envelope, saw the memo, and stormed out of his office, screaming. Later, I was sorting through a box of 2015 records when I found an old IT admin's notebook. The master admin password was scrawled on the back cover. Amazingly, they hadn't changed it in a decade. I used it to access the shared server for the upcoming board meeting and replaced the background image of his opening slide with a photo of the old family house. When he opened the file to preview it, he reportedly threw a coffee mug against the wall. He was unraveling. The paranoia was setting in. He started suspecting everyone around him, too busy looking for ghosts to notice the real threat sitting quietly in the basement. With Oscar distracted by his own paranoia, I made my move on Aunt Veronica. I found her in the private family lounge, sipping tea and looking nervous about Oscar's recent outbursts. I walked in looking defeated with tears, fake ones, welling in my eyes. "I can't take it anymore, Aunt V," I sobbed, sitting across from her. "Oscar hates me. I feel like I don't belong. Maybe I should just leave forever." She softened immediately, her savior complex kicking in. She moved to sit next to me, taking my hand. "Oh, Hector, don't say that. It's just complicated." "Why?" I pressed, letting a tear fall. Why did Grandpa leave me with nothing? Did he hate me? No, no, she whispered, looking around to ensure we were alone. He loved you. But your father, he wasn't a businessman. We had to protect the legacy. We had to hide the will to stop your father from ruining the company. I felt the recorder in my pocket buzz against my leg. She had just admitted to hiding the will. We did what was necessary, she sighed. Gotcha. I sprinted back to the archives, adrenaline pumping through my veins. I didn't have much time. I sat at my terminal and quickly connected the recorder, transferring the audio file to the encrypted USB drive that already held the ledger. To cover my tracks in the system logs, I initiated a mass download of 300 high-res family photo albums. As the progress bar raced across the screen, I slipped the tiny USB drive deep into my left shoe, wiggling my foot to settle it beneath my arch. I had just sat back up when the red lights on the security panel flashed. My monitor went black, displaying a locked security alert message. The basement door burst open. 2 large security guards stormed in and grabbed me by the arms before I could even stand. Mr. Bellmont wants to see you, one of them grunted. They dragged me to Oscar's office. He was standing by his desk, his face purple with rage. Security flagged an unauthorized download from your terminal, he spat. Empty his pockets. My blood turned to ice. The guards shoved me against the wall. They patted down my ribs, my pockets, and my legs. I held my breath as their hands neared my ankles, but they stopped, doing a lazy job because they saw me as a weakling. The USB drive remained safe, tucked deep inside my left shoe. Nothing, sir, the guard said. Oscar glared at me and turned his monitor around. Then explain this. He pointed to the download log. My smokescreen had worked. The system only showed the massive batch of image files I had just started downloading. I was thrown out onto the street, my employee badge confiscated. It looked like a total defeat. I stood on the sidewalk as rain started to fall, watching the massive glass doors lock behind me. To anyone watching, I was just a fired, pathetic ex-employee. But when I got into Duke's car around the corner, I started laughing. Did they find the drive? Duke asked, his eyes sharp. No, I said, pulling the tiny USB drive from my shoe. And I got Veronica's confession. Oscar thought he had won. He thought he had neutralized the threat by firing me. He would go into the gala tomorrow feeling safe, arrogant, and untouchable. That was exactly where we wanted him. He thinks you're gone, Duke said, plugging the drive into his laptop. He thinks the war is over. Tomorrow, when he's standing on that stage in front of the world, we're going to show him that the war hasn't even started yet. The grand ballroom of the Belmont Plaza was a sea of diamonds, tuxedos, and flashing cameras. Every major news network was broadcasting live. From the window of a hotel room directly across the street, I watched the feed on my tablet. Oscar and Richard stood on the stage, holding crystal champagne flutes, looking like kings of the world. Ladies and gentlemen, Oscar's voice boomed through the speakers. Tonight marks the beginning of a new era. The Belmont legacy is eternal. The crowd cheered. Richard smirked, scanning the room for adoration. They had no idea that the new era they were celebrating was about to end before it began. I looked at Joseph Duke, who was standing by the hotel door, straightening his tie. He checked his watch. It's time, Duke said, his voice calm. The federal agents are in position at the service entrance. Remember, Hector, once you press that button, there is no going back. You destroy the company's reputation to save it. I looked at the screen one last time. I saw Aunt Veronica clapping in the front row, the same woman who hugged me while stealing my future. I didn't feel guilt. I felt ready. Let's burn it down, I said. Oscar raised his glass for the final toast. To the future, he shouted. Suddenly, the heavy double doors at the back of the ballroom burst open. The sound echoed like a gunshot. The music cut out instantly. Heads turned in confusion as a dozen federal agents marched in, flanked by Joseph Duke, who was holding a blue legal folder like a weapon. Oscar froze on stage, his glass hovering in midair. What is the meaning of this? He demanded into the microphone, his voice cracking. Duke walked right up to the stage, ignoring the gasps from the billionaires and politicians. He slapped the folder onto the podium. Oscar Bellmont, you are served with a federal injunction freezing all assets immediately. Duke stepped back, and the agents moved forward, handcuffs gleaming under the stage lights. And these gentlemen, Duke added, his voice amplified by the microphone, are here for the charges of wire fraud and embezzlement." The room went deathly silent. You could hear a pin drop. Richard stepped forward aggressively. "You can't do this. Do you know who we are?" "We know exactly who you are," Duke said loud enough for the microphones to catch. "You are trespassers." That was my signal. Alone in the hotel room, I pressed enter on my laptop. Instantly, an email blasted out to the breaking news desks of every major network and the events press list that Duke had secured. It contained a link to a secure cloud folder hosting the digital ledger and, most damning of all, the audio file of Aunt Veronica's confession. Inside the ballroom, the effect was immediate. A wave of murmurs started as phones began to buzz and ping in unison. One reporter near the front clicked the link. Veronica's voice echoed from his phone. "We had to hide the will to stop your father." He immediately shouted, "It's true. They stole the inheritance." On the giant screens behind Oscar, the Bellmont Corp. Social sentiment ticker turned a violent red. The after-hours trading market reacted instantly, with sell orders flooding the system. The illusion of power evaporated in real time. The crowd began to back away from the stage, as if the Bellmonts were contagious. Oscar looked at the screens, his face draining of all color. He watched his legacy vanish in the span of a heartbeat. I left the hotel and crossed the street. I walked through the lobby and into the ballroom. The security guards, confused and sensing the shift in power, didn't stop me. As I walked through the crowd, people parted like the Red Sea. They whispered, pointing at me, the poor relation who had just toppled the giants. I walked up the stairs to the stage. Oscar was trembling, clutching the podium for support. Veronica was weeping in her chair, and Richard looked like a lost child. Oscar looked at me with pure hatred. "You ungrateful wretch," he hissed, though his voice had no power left. "I gave you a job. I fed you. You fed me crumbs from my own table," I said calmly. I didn't scream. I didn't need to. The silence of the room amplified every word. "And now, I'm taking the table back." I nodded to the federal agents. "Get them off my property." As the police escorted my family out in front of the flashing cameras, Oscar tried to maintain his dignity, but it was gone. The king was dethroned. 1 month later, the legal battle was brutal but short. To avoid lengthy prison sentences, Oscar and Richard agreed to a total settlement. They were stripped of all shares and banned from the premises. They walked away with nothing but their freedom and a permanent stain on their names. I sat in the CEO's office, my grandfather's old office. The view of the city was incredible, but the room felt quiet. I had won. I had the billions. I had the company. But my phone didn't ring with calls from family anymore. There were no holiday dinners to plan. The victory was absolute, but it was lonely. Joseph Duke walked in, dropping a stack of files on the desk. "The board is ready for you, Mr. Bellmont. We have a lot of damage to undo if we want to save the stock price." I spun the chair around, looking at the city skyline. I wasn't just a survivor anymore. I was a builder. I picked up a pen. "Then let's get to work," I said. "We're going to build something real this time. No lies. No secrets." I signed the first document. The heist was over. The legacy had begun.
This story isn't just about a billion-dollar fortune or a family feud. It is a powerful reminder that the truth cannot be buried forever, no matter how much money you pile on top of it. Oscar Bellmont fell because he believed that arrogance and power made him untouchable. He judged Hector based on his bank account, not his character. He underestimated the quiet man in the corner because he mistook silence for weakness. The lesson: never mistake silence for surrender. Just because someone isn't shouting doesn't mean they aren't strategizing. Arrogance blinds you to your own weaknesses, while patience allows you to see your enemy's flaws. True power isn't about stealing a throne. It's about having the integrity to keep it. Treat people with respect, because the person you step on today might be the one holding the keys to your future tomorrow. Thank you so much for following Hector's journey from the poor relation to the rightful CEO of the Bellmont Empire. It was an emotional ride of betrayal and vindication, and we hope you felt every moment of his triumph. If you enjoyed this story and love hearing about underdogs who prove everyone wrong, please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode. Tell us in the comments, do you think Hector was right to kick his family out with nothing? Or should he have shown them mercy despite their betrayal? Type Team Justice if you think he did the right thing by taking it all back. See you in the next story.